We have people from all around the world on Everest, different languages, right? Different accents. And as for the language barrier, there are no language barriers when money talks.
So what? Nepal has raised the permit fee to climb Mount Everest $4,000. That's a 36% increase. So next year, climbers will be paying $15,000 for a permit to climb the mountain. Now, it doesn't really make that much of a difference for people who are paying upwards of $100,000 and more to climb the mountain. However, the principle is that theoretically, when a company raises their prices dramatically like that, there would ostensibly be a different level of service that they were attributing to the price range, such as a better product or more safety for the Sherpa in the case of the Nepali government. The Department of Culture and Tourism, they've increased the permit fees to Mount Everest $4,000, 36%. And what do their customers get out of that? Well, so far, really nothing. Nepal has announced no new regulations or safety measures that would ensure the safety of the high-altitude workers, namely the Sherpa on the mountain. In September of 2024, I did an enlightening interview with Angela Benevides of ExplorersWeb, and we spoke about the tragic death of the Kenyan climber Joshua Kirui and his Sherpa Nawang Sherpa. Kirui was endeavoring to climb Everest without the use of bottled oxygen, and Nawang, his Sherpa, refused to leave him when he got into trouble. They both died not too far from the summit, an absolutely devastating story. However, what Angela goes into in a series of heartbreaking articles in ExplorersWeb was that one, Nawang had no climbing experience on Mount Everest. He was a guide on previous climbing trips, a highly respected Sherpa, but almost zero Everest experience, and he refused to leave the side of Kirui. They were encountered on the way down by a climber named John Mills, who tried to convince Nawang to leave the side of Kirui. He refused, and when climbers returned there the next day, Nawang had disappeared. It's a heartbreaking story, and in a moment, I'm going to share with you that interview that I did with Angela that highlights how Sherpa are really powerless up at altitude. They do not have the authority to turn a client around. And also, where people kind of get things wrong a little bit here is that these individuals are providing absolutely critical services to mostly inexperienced clientele that are up on the mountain, but they are not licensed guides. They're not licensed with the IFMGA, which is the International Federation of Mountain Guides Association. They are high altitude workers. This is something that the Nepal government has not truly recognized, and in raising their fees by $4,000, they have not even identified that this is an issue that really should be attended to. Now, let me just jump in here and say it's really none of my business or the business of anybody outside of Nepal, because it's their mountain. They can do whatever they want. So if you want to climb the mountain, that's the way it goes. However, when an organization raises their fees by such a drastic amount, you would think that maybe they'd want to do something that would say, we're going to go to extra steps to provide more safety for the people who are working on the mountain, to provide the services to the clients who are shelling out $15,000 to have a shot at climbing the mountain. Before we cut to that amazing interview with Angela Benevides and talk about the articles that she wrote about the deaths of Kirui and the disappearance of Nawang, who gave his life to stay with the Kenyan climber, I was sent a quote by a friend of mine, an amazing filmmaker and many times summiter of Mount Everest and other mountains throughout the realm of the 8,000 meter peaks, Elia Sekali. He sent me this quote when we were having a discussion about ethics and morality in mountaineering that says, and this fits perfectly with Nepal raising their fees but not changing what kind of service they're providing. Quote, history shows that where ethics and economics come in conflict, victory is always with economics. Vested interests have never been known to have willingly divested themselves unless there was sufficient force to compel them. Amazing and perfect and fitting to lead into this interview with Angela Benevides. Let's cut to that right now. Okay, so another article that I thought was so exceptional and sad that you wrote not long ago, it was September, about the Sherpa who died with the Kenyan gentleman on Mount Everest who was endeavoring to climb Mount Everest without oxygen. And in your article, you explained that this Sherpa, this beautiful man, this like really kind person, had zero experience and would not leave his client and died with him. That's a sad story.
Yeah, well, it's a series of stories about a Sherpa who died not to abandon his client. But the story has so many more implications, and it's calling for an open debate about many things. I heard about Nawang Sherpa for the first time, well, when I read the name in a casualties list in spring this year. But then I knew how he had died because of course, an email from a British climber, John Mills, who told me that he was the last person who saw Nawang Sherpa and his client Kirui from Kenya alive, right? And it was something he did for personal reasons because he was shocked at what he had to live, at the experience, and I think he really needed to let the world know about what had happened, right? And that's why he contacted us, and we wrote the story, right? Nawang Sherpa was assigned to a Kenyan climber with not much previous experience. He had summited Manaslu before, but nothing more. And he wanted to try and climb Everest without oxygen, but with Sherpa support, right? This Sherpa had an oxygen system in his backpack to use in case of emergency. According to what John Mills found out in base camp, his client started acting strangely. He was probably under some kind of acute mountain sickness, probably cerebral edema. He couldn't move. Reportedly, when they were on the way back from the summit, but he couldn't move, he would reject oxygen violently, and the Sherpa didn't know what to do. He didn't have the authority to turn his client back. So what we have is several debates here. First, who wants to climb Everest without oxygen? Under which conditions? In which state? What does it take to go without oxygen? Second, which was the center of our first story, Sherpas have no authority to turn a client back. So can they be held responsible of their clients' lives? That Sherpa, according to reports, there are facts that have not been confirmed because I asked the expedition operator for whom this Sherpa worked, but I never got an answer from them. And he waited with his client, waiting for further instructions, apparently. They came to a point where none of them could move. And when John Mills found them, they were still alive, but they were beyond any kind of hope. John asked for help, but they were among the last on the mountain that day. the rescue team could only go up the mountain on the following day. They found Kirui's body. He had already perished, and he couldn't even find the body of the Sherpa. Probably, who knows, it was moved or fell or whatever. It is a very sad story. It is something that should be planned and settled down in advance. And it also reflects how different one company from another is, because this wouldn't have, in my opinion, this wouldn't have happened with a big Western company, because there are a series of disclaimers and a different system. I don't know. Well, this wouldn't have happened. Maybe it's too much, but there are different, right? And there are things that if they really want to, in this process of commercialization of mountaineering, there are some aspects that have to be dealt with in advance. They have to be adjusted, because the final goal is not to have people dying on the mountain. And it is not clear whether not only Nawang Sherpa's life, but also Kirui's life could have been saved if someone within authority enough could have made this guy sip oxygen and bring him down to the relative safety of a higher camp where he could have got some medicine. So there are a lot of implications on that story. And then afterwards, we were contacted by the home team of Kiruis from Kenya. We had this email from Kenya saying that apparently the Sherpa had no previous experience on Everest. And they were very surprised that someone without previous experience on Everest was guiding someone who wanted to climb without oxygen as his only Sherpa. So yeah, indeed, there are lots of unanswered questions here and some essential issues that has to be addressed in order to prevent such episodes from happening. Because in the end, a climber died, and again, mountain workers are taking the worst part of it. They are taking the big toll in lives or injuries on the mountains, and this is not acceptable.
If I could just jump in really quickly, if you're enjoying this video, would you take a moment and click the subscribe button and be sure to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified every time a new video comes out. It would mean a lot to the channel if you did so. And also take a look at the members section where you can get access to exclusive content and videos and live events. There's so many little things to unpack there, but one of them being that in the article you talked about, it's not clear whether Kirui was expecting to have a Sherpa with him that had I think this photograph that was sent of supposedly the Sherpa he would be with would have been to the summit 5 times. Am I mixing that up? But did he expect there to be a highly experienced Sherpa with him?
These are some of the details that are not clear, and the only ones who could answer these questions are the responsible people of the outfitting company, right? Because Kirui is sadly not there to explain. Nawang is not there to explain, and the outfitting company, right? They are the only ones who know this whole story. This person in Kenya, which was Kirui's previous climbing partner, they climbed Manaslu together. He was not aware of the entire negotiation. And as for the language barrier, there are no language barriers when money talks. We have people from all around the world on Everest, different languages, right? Different accents. And of course, you may lack the news and the nuances, and sometimes you may have some cultural classes, but the really important things are usually made clear for the welfare of everyone.
Wow, that's a headline. There are no language barriers when money is part of the equation or something like that. Oof. Just in kind of the broader context, and before we kind of wrap this up, is on the outside of it, as people are kind of observing what's going on in the 8,000 meter peaks, they're talking about the lack of, there's a lot of the cliche things. The Sherpa get no respect, or people, they think of a Sherpa up high as a guide. And And in some respects, I suppose, yes, they are guiding somebody, but the majority of them are not IFMGA certified, International Federation of Mountain Guides Association. NIMS isn't one. Lama wasn't one on Shishapangma. Mingmar wasn't one on Shishapangma. And so technically they, as you said, they can't tell their client to turn around. And then because they're human beings and people with solid kind of ethical or moral codes, they're not going to abandon their client either. So these people are dying. And the companies, this is what, and I'll try to like settle down here a little bit. The companies that are sending the Sherpa up there, the mountain workers, are owned by their own individual cultural people. I'm just going to leave it at that. That's sad.
It's sad, and it has to be fixed. I mean, as I always say, I'm not, I might have my opinions. Of course, I still like to read about real adventures, but I do understand that the countries with big mountains want to have an industry out of high altitude tourism, and that's okay. But then you will have to sell things right and sell things clear before. They say, yeah, well, it happens the same in the Alps. Yes. In the Alps, there was an evolution. There was a very serious accident that led to the creation of the Compagnie des Guides de Chamonix. And then same in Aosta Valley. And now what you have is very professional climbers and very professional guides, right? Making the decisions. So this must be dealt with somehow, apply to high altitude. Because even if a Sherpa has is perfectly internationally credited, he still may not have the authority to turn a client around. This is a power of the expedition leader, who is usually in base camp. But what about if they don't have communication means? If the radio goes dead, which happened in the case of Nawang, what if they disobey the messages from base camp? We don't know what happened last year on Shishapangma when Gina and Tenzin Lama were climbing after the first avalanche struck. I don't know what happened, and I don't know what the messages from base camp were. This is a complex matter, but we're talking about high altitude mountaineering where all kind of strange things can happen. Lack of communication, unexpected situations, and this has to be foreseen, planned, and fixed in advance. And the client has to be clearly informed and clearly committed to stick to the rules. I'm no one to tell anyone how to run their business, but I am the one who writes about events happening on the mountains, and people is dying. So we're not talking about not finishing a marathon and then you just take the subway and go home or go back to your hotel. We're talking about not going back to your life, to family. So yeah, the industry of high altitude mountaineering in Nepal and Pakistan is evolving. They are developing a big business. Well, in addition to the big business, they need to settle these kind of issues right and try to find solutions in advance before disaster happens.
Having had many conversations with expedition organizers about the fee increase and also the fees collected when people are bringing garbage back down from the mountain, it has been said, and it is widely known, that a lot of the money connected actually never finds its way back into the system, say to the SPCC, the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee. It is rumored and fairly well known, like the elephant in the room, that a lot of this extra money ends up in the pockets of people, corrupt officials, if you will. So this $4,000, really, where is it going to go? Is it going to go to build the infrastructure of the Khumbu region? Is it going to build schools, hospitals, provide insurance for these gentlemen and women who are climbing and providing services on Mount Everest? It remains to be seen. The sad thing about this story is that Nawang Sherpa lost his life and totally disappeared off the mountain, very little experience, and the Nepal government did not impose any sanctions on the guiding company who sent him up there, nor did they inform Kirui that he had very little experience. If you want a raw opinion from not only from me, but others that I've spoken to in the industry, Nepal needs to do something about this to improve not only the safety of the Sherpa and the high altitude workers on the mountain, but also the clients who are paying very, very good money to go there. And when a company tells them that they are being provided with an experienced high altitude worker, they should be able to take that at face value, that in fact, that's the truth. No sanctions, no change. $4,000 more a year. If you want to climb Mount Everest, do so at your own risk. My advice would be the more you pay, the more likelihood you have of being safe and not losing your life up there. It's a sad state of affairs, but the more you pay, the better assured you're going to be that the people with you up high will have a high level of experience to provide you with the safety you need when S hits the fan. Thanks for being here. Do a good deed. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one tiny step at a time. Peace be with you.